Burnout is a choice, not a curse. What if you're actually choosing burnout every day? This realization freed me from my own exhaustion cycle. I was stuck in a pattern, answering emails at 11 p.m., skipping breaks, wearing exhaustion like a badge of honor, until I discovered how to break free. In this video, I'm sharing 5 mental frameworks that transformed my relationship with work and energy. These practical tools help me escape the burnout crossroads when nothing else worked. From treating your energy like a financial portfolio to implementing micro-recovery protocols, these approaches are backed by psychology research on how high performers maintain output without sacrificing themselves in the process. My breaking point. Remember when I showed up to that important client meeting with 2 different shoes? That wasn't just a funny mistake, it was my body screaming that I was at my breaking point. 1 black heel, 1 navy pump. The clients actually laughed it off, but I just stood there, frozen, staring down at my feet, wondering how I hadn't noticed. That moment still flashes in my mind because it was my wake-up call. You know, I used to think burnout was something that just happened to me, like catching a cold or getting stuck in traffic. An unavoidable force of nature that ambitious people eventually face. Just push through it, I'd tell myself. Everyone feels this way. But that's the thing. Burnout isn't something that randomly selects its victims. It follows patterns, and I was creating those patterns every single day without realizing it. When I hit rock bottom, it went beyond mismatched shoes. I was forgetting important deadlines that used to be second nature to me. I found myself crying in bathroom stalls between meetings, splashing cold water on my face, and reapplying makeup like nothing was wrong. I was working 24/7, but somehow drowning more with each passing day. My inbox had hundreds of unread messages. My notes were scattered across different apps, and I couldn't remember the last time I had a full night's sleep without waking up in a panic. My life 3 years ago was unsustainable. My calendar was a solid block of color. Back-to-back meetings with 0 buffer time. I'd rush from one conference room to another while simultaneously answering messages. My phone constantly buzzed with notifications, a stream of demands for my attention. My to-do list never ended. I'd complete 10 tasks and somehow end the day with 15 more. I stayed up until 2 a.m. for quiet hours to catch up, then dragged myself out of bed 4 hours later to repeat everything. Coffee wasn't a pleasure, it was life support. The worst part was the isolation. I stopped reaching out to friends because I didn't have time. I canceled plans because something came up at work. I missed my niece's birthday party because I was catching up on weekend work. I was physically present at family dinners, but mentally drafting emails. My partner would talk to me and I'd nod without hearing a word. I was there, but not really there. And I thought this was normal. I thought this was what success looked like. I believed if I pushed harder, worked longer, sacrificed more, eventually things would calm down. But they never did, because I never changed the underlying patterns. What shocked me was realizing how many little choices I made daily that led me straight into burnout. I'd say yes to projects when already overloaded. I'd check email first thing in bed. I'd skip lunch for just one more task. I'd promise deliverables on impossible timelines because I didn't want to disappoint anyone. Each decision seemed small, but together, they created a perfect storm. I tried the usual fixes. I took a vacation but spent half on my laptop. I bought fancy planners and productivity apps. I even considered quitting my job. But the turning point wasn't any of those things. It was something much more powerful that I discovered through desperation. After the mismatched shoes incident, I finally admitted something had to change. I couldn't continue this way. So I did what I always do when facing a problem. I researched. I read every book and study on burnout I could find. I talked to psychologists. I interviewed people who balanced ambition and well-being. What I discovered transformed everything. Burnout isn't simply about being busy or working hard. It's about specific psychological patterns and habits that drain us faster than we can recover. It's about how we think about our work, our worth, and our energy. And most importantly, it's about choices we make, often unconsciously, that we can learn to make differently. What I learned completely changed my relationship with work and energy. It's not a quick fix or productivity hack. It's a fundamental shift in approaching ambition, while protecting well-being. These frameworks help me rebuild my career sustainably, accomplishing more without constantly feeling underwater. So is burnout really a choice, or are we victims of circumstance? The research shows we have more control than we think, not through vague advice like practice self-care or learn to say no, but through specific frameworks addressing the real psychological dynamics behind burnout. External factors matter. Toxic workplaces, economic pressures, systemic issues are real. But within those constraints, we have more agency than we realize. Think of it this way. We can't control the weather, but we can choose to bring an umbrella. We can't always control work circumstances, but we can control how we respond, structure our energy, and create boundaries. Those choices determine whether we burn out or thrive. My breakthrough came when I stopped seeing burnout as inevitable and recognized it as resulting from specific patterns I could change. It wasn't about working less, though sometimes that's part of it. It was about working differently, understanding the hidden dynamics of energy, boundaries, thinking, patterns, recovery, and purpose. Looking back at who I was 3 years ago, I barely recognize that person. I'm still driven and passionate about my work, but now I channel that drive in ways that sustain rather than drain me. My ambition and well-being aren't enemies anymore, they're partners. Now let me introduce you to the first framework that revolutionized my approach: energy as currency. This powerful concept will show you exactly how to prevent burnout by managing your most precious resource, not your time, but your energy. Energy as currency, your hidden bank account. It's crazy. We check our bank accounts daily, but never once check our energy balance. What if I told you that tracking where your mental and physical energy goes reveals shocking patterns that explain why you're always exhausted despite doing everything right? I discovered this the hard way when I finally decided to treat my energy with the same respect I give my finances. And let me tell you, the results were eye-opening. When I actually sat down and tracked my energy for a week, I was horrified. I had been hemorrhaging my most precious resource on things that weren't even important to me. Those endless quick meetings consumed my entire morning. Those just 5 minutes tasks multiplied until my whole day vanished. I was making terrible investments with my energy every single day and wondering why I felt bankrupt by Wednesday afternoon. This energy finance parallel isn't merely metaphorical. Neuroscience research confirms that our brains process energy expenditure similarly to financial decisions. A 2019 study in the Journal of Neuroscience found that identical neural pathways activate when deciding about effort as when making money choices. Our brains calculate an effort-to-reward ratio for every task we consider. Let me show you what my energy audit looked like 3 years ago. I created a simple grid with my energy levels throughout the day on one axis and the activities I was doing on the other. I discovered that I consistently spent my peak energy hours, 9 to 11 a.m., when my brain was firing on all cylinders, on responding to others' emails, and sitting in status meetings where I barely spoke. Meanwhile, I attempted my most creative and strategic work at 4 p.m., when my brain was running on fumes. It resembled taking my financial bonus check and spending it on unused subscriptions while putting rent on a high-interest credit card. No financial advisor would recommend that strategy with money, so why apply it to something even more valuable: limited daily energy? This approach isn't about working less, though that might naturally happen. It's about strategic energy allocation. If you had $100 to invest daily, would you distribute it randomly to whoever asked? Or would you carefully consider the potential return on each investment? That's the energy as currency framework. Recognizing that your energy deserves the same careful allocation as your financial resources. Through research and personal experiments, I identified 3 major energy drains that ambitious people overlook. First is decision fatigue, which explains why Steve Jobs wore the same outfit daily. Each decision, no matter how small, taxes our mental energy. After hundreds of minor decisions, our ability to make good choices plummets. This explains why, after back-to-back meetings, you order takeout instead of cooking that planned healthy meal. The second drain is emotional labor, energy required to manage feelings and expressions at work. This particularly affects people in client-facing roles or toxic environments. Constantly masking true feelings, like pretending enthusiasm for a doomed project, creates compounding energy debt. The third drain was task switching. Studies show each time you switch tasks, checking email mid-report writing, it takes approximately 23 minutes to fully regain focus. I did this dozens of times daily, working constantly, but accomplishing little. My solution? I developed a simple energy tracking method that transformed my productivity. For 1 week, I set an hourly timer. When it rang, I noted what I was doing, my energy level, and whether the task felt energizing or draining. After 7 days, patterns emerged clearly. I identified when my energy peaked and crashed, which activities consistently drained me, and which ones actually replenished me. With this data, I restructured my day completely. I protected peak energy hours for creative work and strategic thinking. I grouped similar tasks to minimize task switching costs. I scheduled recovery periods before and after draining activities. I began declining energy-intensive commitments with minimal returns. The results were remarkable. Within a month, I doubled my productive output while working fewer hours by aligning with my natural energy rhythms instead of fighting them. It wasn't about working harder, but allocating smarter. The Energy as Currency framework consists of 3 core principles. First, identifying energy leaks, activities, people, and environments that drain you without adequate return, like withdrawals from your account. Second, making conscious energy investments, deliberately choosing where your resources go based on potential returns. Third, building energy reserves, creating practices that replenish your energy faster than you spend it. This approach succeeds by converting abstract daily energy into something concrete and measurable. Just as tracking expenses reveals financial patterns, monitoring energy expenditure uncovers invisible habits. A practical example. I discovered video calls drain me twice as much as in-person meetings. I started scheduling recovery time after Zoom sessions and converted certain recurring meetings to phone calls I could take while walking. This simple adjustment freed enough mental bandwidth to tackle a long postponed creative project. I also identified certain people as energy vampires, those who leave you feeling marathon exhausted after brief interactions. Recognizing these encounters as actual withdrawals from my energy account helped me engage more intentionally with these individuals. The framework helped me realize that seemingly unproductive activities, afternoon walks, or hand-sketching ideas before execution, were actually valuable energy investments. Though appearing as wasted time, they generated substantial returns in creativity and mental clarity that exceeded their energy cost. Boundary redesign, the art of strategic no's. Those energy investments changed my productivity, but they kept getting hijacked by one thing: my complete inability to set boundaries. What I discovered next completely challenged my assumption that always being available was the path to success. In fact, research shows the exact opposite is true, and this revelation transformed my calendar and how people actually perceived my work. Think about the last time you set a boundary at work. Maybe you declined a meeting, stopped answering emails after 7 p.m., or pushed back on an unrealistic deadline. Did you feel a little pang of guilt? That uncomfortable feeling that you were somehow letting people down? I used to feel that all the time. I thought setting boundaries meant being difficult or uncooperative. I was convinced that my willingness to be available 24/7 was my competitive advantage. If someone needed me at 9 p.m. on a Friday, I'd be there. Weekend email? I'd respond within minutes. Last-minute request that required me to cancel personal plans? No problem. I wore this constant availability like a badge of honor. But here's what's fascinating. A study from the Harvard Business Review found that the highest performers aren't the ones who say yes to everything. They're actually the ones who set the most boundaries. They're just strategic about which ones they choose. When I first read that, I was skeptical. How could saying no possibly make me more successful? But the research was clear. Boundary setting directly linked to higher performance and stronger professional relationships. So I started looking more closely at the most respected people in my field. I noticed something I'd completely missed before. They weren't actually available all the time. They had very clear parameters around their time and energy. When they were in meetings, they were fully present. when they were off, they were truly off. And this shocked me. People didn't respect them less for it. They actually respected them more. Through my research, I identified 3 specific types of boundaries that most professionals never set, but absolutely should. Time boundaries define when you're available for work and when you're not. I was treating my schedule like a public park, open to anyone, at any hour. I started small by creating time containers, designated specific hours for specific activities. I blocked 9-11 a.m. as my deep work time. No meetings, no calls, no interruptions. I also established a firm workday end at 6:30 p.m. This simple change gave my days a protective structure they desperately needed. Expectation boundaries clarify what others can reasonably expect from you regarding turnaround time, availability, and deliverables. Without these, people naturally assume your fastest response time is your standard. I remember having to reset expectations with my boss when she added another urgent request while I was already overloaded. Instead of my usual, "I'll get it done somehow," I said, "I'm committed to delivering quality work on the Anderson project by Thursday as we discussed." Taking on the Stevens report now would mean either pushing the Anderson deadline to Monday or delivering lower quality work on both. Which would you prefer? Her response transformed our working relationship. Rather than disappointment, she appreciated the clarity. She made an informed decision based on reality, rather than assuming I could somehow bend the laws of physics. From then on, our conversations about deadlines became more transparent and realistic. Accessibility boundaries determine how and when people can reach you. These were game changers in our hyper-connected world where instant responses are expected around the clock. I implemented a notification detox, turning off non-essential alerts and setting up after-hours email autoresponders. I even removed email from my phone entirely. This sounds extreme, but I asked myself, is any work email truly so urgent it can't wait until I'm at my computer? For me, the answer was no. For genuine emergencies, people could call. Setting these boundaries created a professional fortress, not to keep people out, but to ensure what happened inside was valuable and deliberate. The research supports this approach. A study from the Journal of Occupational Health Psychology found that clear boundaries improve team performance by creating clarity and preventing resentment. Another study published in the Academy of Management journal revealed that leaders who modeled healthy boundaries had more engaged and productive teams. When you respect your own boundaries, you implicitly respect others' boundaries too, creating a culture of mutual respect. The counterintuitive truth I discovered was that setting clear boundaries made people respect me more, not less. When I stopped being instantly available, people valued my time and input more highly. My words carried more weight in meetings. My opinions were sought more deliberately. My relationships improved because I brought my best self to interactions, rather than a depleted, resentful version secretly checking the clock. I was fully present when working and fully present when not. The boundary redesign method that transformed my work involved 3 steps: identify, communicate, and reinforce. First, I identified which boundaries would most impact my energy and productivity, asking what situations consistently drain me or create resentment. Next, I communicated these boundaries clearly and unapologetically, framing them as mutual benefits. To ensure I can give your projects my best thinking, I check email between 9 a.m. and 7 p.m. on weekdays. Finally, I reinforced these boundaries consistently. The hardest part. Every time I responded to a non-emergency email at 10 p.m., I taught people my boundary wasn't real. Healthy boundary setting for ambitious professionals isn't about building walls or being inflexible. It's about strategically protecting your most valuable resources, time, energy, and attention, communicated with confidence and clarity. Number 5, cognitive reframing, breaking the burnout mindset. Strategic boundaries protect your resources, but even with them in place, I kept hitting burnout walls until I discovered the hidden culprit, my own thinking patterns. Did you know there are specific thought distortions that ambitious people mistake for normal thinking, but they actually rewire your brain chemistry to accelerate burnout? Yeah, I was shocked too. I remember sitting in my therapist's office after implementing all those perfect boundaries we just talked about. I was confused. I'm doing everything right, I told her. So why do I still feel like I'm drowning? She smiled that knowing smile therapists have and asked me a simple question. What stories are you telling yourself about your work? This stopped me in my tracks. Stories? I'm just working hard. But as we explored further, I realized my brain was running background programs, distorted thought patterns, that were pushing me toward burnout despite my well-crafted external boundaries. Our thoughts actively shape our physiology. According to research in cognitive behavioral therapy, the way we interpret situations changes our brain chemistry. Repeatedly engaging in certain thought patterns creates neural pathways that release stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. We're essentially pressing the gas pedal on burnout with our minds, even when our external circumstances seem fine. I discovered 3 main thought distortions driving my burnout. First was catastrophizing. Thoughts like, if I don't finish this project perfectly, my career is over. This sent my stress response into overdrive, making me work frantically late into the night. The truth? No single project would make or break my career, but my brain was operating on this distorted story. The second pattern, all or nothing thinking, showed up as, I'll rest when it's done. The problem with knowledge work is nothing is ever truly done. This pattern had me constantly postponing rest, waiting for a finish line that never appeared. Just one more email, then I can relax, I'd think. That moment never came. The third culprit was shoulding. Thoughts beginning with, I should be able to handle this, or I shouldn't need help. These created intense shame whenever I couldn't meet unrealistic standards. Shame makes us hide struggles and avoid asking for help, exactly what accelerates burnout. These patterns are so normalized in ambitious circles that we mistake them for good work ethic. We praise the if I don't do it, no one will mindset, not recognizing this messiah complex leads to exhaustion and resentment. We admire those who say, I'll sleep when I'm dead, failing to see the dangerous distortion. Breaking free starts with awareness. I created a thought trigger journal to record situations that stressed me out and the automatic thoughts that followed. One Tuesday afternoon, I caught myself about to cancel lunch with a friend to finish a presentation. As I wrote in my journal, I saw it clearly. If I take this break, I'll fall behind and disappoint everyone. Classic catastrophizing. But awareness alone isn't enough. The next step is cognitive reframing, actively changing these patterns. That day, instead of canceling lunch, I challenged the thought, is it really true I'll disappoint everyone? What's the evidence? Then I reframed it. Taking a break will help me return with fresh ideas. The presentation will be better because I stepped away. I went to lunch, and the presentation turned out fine. The connection between perfectionism and procrastination fascinated me. They're 2 sides of the same burnout coin. When we think this has to be flawless, we often procrastinate from fear of falling short. Then the looming deadline creates enormous stress and we end up rushing anyway. It's a vicious cycle. For the if I don't do it, no one will thought, I started asking, what would happen if I couldn't do this? Would someone else step up? Would the world keep turning? Usually the answer was yes. This helped me prioritize where my energy truly needed to go. For I'll rest when it's done, I reframed to rest is part of the work. Research confirms our brains need periods of rest to consolidate learning and solve complex problems. By seeing rest as essential to productivity rather than its enemy, I could take breaks without guilt. The challenge with cognitive reframing is consistency. These patterns have been reinforced for years. I set phone reminders with questions like, what story are you telling yourself right now? These interruptions helped me catch distorted thinking before it triggered burnout behaviors. Over time, something incredible happened. As my thought patterns changed, my physical symptoms, headaches, insomnia, constant fatigue, began to fade. My brain produced different chemicals because I fed it different thoughts. Cognitive reframing has been shown to reduce cortisol levels and increase dopamine and serotonin, hormones associated with well-being. The most powerful reframe for me was shifting from I have to do this to I choose to do this. That simple change from obligation to choice restored my sense of agency. Even when doing tasks I didn't love, acknowledging my choice made them less draining. Cognitive reframing isn't about positive thinking or denying reality. It's about accurate thinking. Sometimes work is genuinely overwhelming. Sometimes deadlines are truly tight. Reframing doesn't pretend these challenges don't exist. The science helps us respond to them in ways that don't accelerate burnout. While reframing our thoughts helps tremendously, I was still missing a critical piece of the burnout puzzle. You know how we think weekend catch-up and vacations will save us from burnout? Turns out that's completely backward. And there's a science-backed approach used by top performers that works so much better than our typical push through until the break mentality. I used to pride myself on my ability to power through exhaustion. I'd work for 10, 12, sometimes 14 hours straight, pushing past all those signals my body was sending me. My strategy? I'd recover on the weekend or during that vacation I kept postponing. I thought that's what ambitious people did. Work now, rest later. But here's what shocked me when I dug into the research. This recovery debt approach I was so proud of actually made my burnout worse. A 2018 study in the Journal of Applied Psychology found that people who postpone recovery until weekends or vacations showed significantly higher burnout rates than those who incorporated regular recovery periods throughout their workdays. Think about it. Would you only hydrate after a marathon instead of drinking water throughout the race? Of course not. Yet that's exactly how most of us approach our mental and physical energy at work. We run ourselves into the ground and then wonder why a weekend barely makes a dent in our exhaustion. This is where the concept of micro-recovery comes in. Instead of saving all recovery for some future break, micro-recovery protocols introduce strategic, intentional rest periods throughout your day. These are specifically designed to work with your body's natural energy cycles. The science behind this is fascinating. Our brains naturally operate in what scientists call ultradian rhythms, 90-minute cycles of high focus followed by lower energy. Chronobiologist Nathaniel Kleitman found that pushing past these natural dips results in more mistakes and fatigue. When we ignore these biological cycles, we're fighting against our own physiology. After researching how elite athletes approach recovery, I implemented 3 specific micro-recovery protocols that transformed my workday. First, the 90-minute work block. I began working in focused 90-minute intervals, aligned with my body's natural ultradian rhythm. I'd set a timer, close all distractions, and work with complete focus. Then comes the crucial part, a deliberate 15 to 20-minute recovery period. Not checking email or scrolling, but actual recovery. During these recovery periods, I do something physically different. Step outside, stretch, or simply stare out the window. University of Illinois research confirms that brief diversions dramatically improve focus for prolonged periods. The second protocol was the 5-minute reset, ultra-short recovery moments scattered throughout the day, especially before or after high-stress events. A 2017 study found that even 5-minute breaks involving deep breathing reduced cortisol levels by up to 25%. My favorite reset is remarkably simple. I step away from screens, close my eyes, and take 10 deep breaths. Sometimes I stretch or walk around the block. The key is giving your nervous system a chance to downregulate, switching from fight or flight to rest and digest mode. I discovered something crucial. Checking your phone isn't a break for your brain. When we switch from work to phones, we're just shifting to a different cognitive load. A 2016 University of California study found people who took breaks without digital devices reported 42% higher mental restoration than those using phones during breaks. The third protocol was the daily power down ritual, a consistent 10 to 15-minute practice at day's end that helps your brain recognize work is finished. I write down 3 accomplishments, identify tomorrow's priorities, and physically shut down my computer while saying, "Work is complete for today." It sounds simple, but neuroscience shows ritual behaviors send powerful signals to our brains. Research published in Work and Stress Journal found employees using end-of-day rituals reported significantly better work-life boundaries and lower evening stress levels. This approach, strategic work intervals with intentional recovery, mirrors what elite athletes have used for decades. Olympic swimmers work in intervals with specific recovery periods. Marathon runners incorporate strategic walking breaks. Chess grandmasters take specific breaks during tournaments to optimize mental performance. I remember the day this all clicked for me. After a particularly intense project, I had been working 70-hour weeks and felt completely depleted. No amount of coffee helped. My weekend recovery consisted of catching up on more work and worrying about Monday. That Sunday night, I broke down in tears, wondering how I'd face another week. That emotional moment showed me something had to change. The results after implementing micro-recovery were dramatic. Within 3 weeks, my focus improved by roughly 40% according to my tracking. The surprising part? I worked fewer total hours while my productive output increased. The 2 trees practice made a huge difference. Whenever mental fatigue set in, I'd walk from one tree to another in my neighborhood. About a 10-minute round trip. The combination of nature exposure, movement, and mental disengagement reset my brain better than any caffeine ever could. Micro-recovery works with your biology instead of against it. Research in sports science shows the most effective training happens during the recovery period afterward, when muscles rebuild. The same applies to cognitive performance. Our brains need these strategic recovery periods to consolidate learning and replenish depleted neurochemicals. Sustainable productivity isn't about how long you can work, it's about how effectively you recover. The quality of your rest directly determines the quality of your work. Purpose recalibration. Finding your true north. The quality of your rest matters enormously, but there's actually something even more powerful at work beneath the surface. When I implemented all these recovery techniques, I still felt something was missing, until I discovered what researchers call the purpose alignment gap. And it changed everything about how I approach my work. Have you ever noticed how some people can work insanely long hours on projects they're passionate about and somehow stay energized, while others burn out quickly even with a reasonable workload? I used to think these people just had better genetics or something. But it turns out there's a scientific explanation. I was doing everything right according to productivity experts. I had my energy management down, set clear boundaries, reframed my negative thoughts, and implemented those micro-recovery protocols. But I felt like I was drifting without an anchor. I'd stare at my to-do list, feeling a strange emptiness despite checking off all the boxes. My work felt hollow, efficient but meaningless, like I was navigating without a true north. That's when I stumbled across research from the University of California that transformed my understanding of burnout. They found that burnout is 3 times more likely when your daily tasks feel disconnected from what truly matters to you. 3 times. No recovery technique can overcome that kind of disadvantage. This disconnect is what researchers call the purpose alignment gap, the space between what you're actually doing day to day and what feels meaningful to you. The wider this gap, the faster you burn out, regardless of your productivity systems. For me, this gap had slowly grown without me noticing. I was creating content because it performed well, not because it actually helped people. I was taking meetings to please others, not because they moved the needle on things I cared about. I was essentially spending my days as someone else's version of productive. Identifying if you have a purpose alignment gap is straightforward. Take a look at your calendar and to-do list from the past week. For each item, ask yourself, if no one was watching, would I still choose to spend time on this? The items that make you hesitate, those are your alignment gaps. When I did this exercise, I realized that nearly 70% of my weekly tasks felt disconnected from what I actually cared about. Even with perfect boundaries and energy management, my internal compass was misaligned. This is where the purpose recalibration exercise comes in. First, I needed to get clear on my actual purpose. I sat down with a blank page and completed these statements. I'm at my best when I'm, the people I most want to help are, and the change I want to create is. Taking time with these questions revealed something surprising. What energized me most was helping overwhelmed people find more ease and joy in their work. With this clarity, I created a simple T-chart mapping my responsibilities against my purpose. Some tasks were obviously aligned, others clearly weren't, but most interestingly, many could be realigned based on how I approached them. My weekly team meetings, for example, transformed from administrative drains into opportunities to embody the supportive approach I wanted to share with my audience. This purpose recalibration changed my decision-making process. Instead of asking, "Can I fit this in?" I started asking, "Does this align with my purpose?" The shift seemed subtle, but it was revolutionary for my energy levels. Research from the University of Pennsylvania supports this. They found that when people connect their work to their values and purpose, they can sustain high performance for much longer without burning out. This happens because meaning-driven work activates different neural pathways than obligation-driven work. When you work from a place of purpose, your brain releases more dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, neurochemicals that increase resilience and creativity. But obligation-driven work triggers cortisol, which depletes your energy over time. This doesn't mean you'll suddenly love every minute of your job, but you can find more energy-giving elements even in challenging work when you connect it to what matters to you. After recalibrating my purpose, I made some tough decisions. Some projects that looked impressive but didn't align with my purpose had to go. I developed 3 questions I now ask before taking on anything new. Does this align with the impact I want to have? Will this energize me or drain me in the long run? And if I say yes to this, what am I implicitly saying no to? These questions protect me from purpose drift, that slow, imperceptible shift away from what matters most. Purpose isn't static. It requires regular realignment as new opportunities arise. Surprisingly, I didn't need to change jobs or make dramatic life changes. I just restructured how I approached my existing work. I now create content focused first on genuinely helping my audience, rather than chasing algorithms. I batch admin tasks during naturally lower energy periods, rather than letting them interrupt my purpose-driven work. Within weeks, I noticed something remarkable. Tasks that used to exhaust me became energizing. Projects I used to procrastinate on became ones I looked forward to. My energy remained stable even during busy periods. Aligning with your purpose isn't a magical cure that makes work effortless. There will still be hard days and challenging tasks, but purpose creates intrinsic motivation, the kind that comes from within rather than from external pressures. Research consistently shows this type of motivation is far more sustainable. When driven by purpose, setbacks become learning opportunities rather than evidence of failure. Challenges become interesting puzzles rather than overwhelming obstacles. Most importantly, your work becomes a source of energy rather than just a drain on it. Early warning system, catching burnout before it starts. Finding your purpose is life-changing, but wouldn't it be better to prevent burnout entirely? Here's something that blew my mind. Your body actually sends you warning signals, weeks or even months before you hit full burnout. But most of us are trained to ignore them as just stress, or even celebrate them as dedication to the grind. I used to think burnout was this sudden collapse that happened when you least expected it. Like one day you're fine, and the next you're completely destroyed. But that's not how it works at all. Research from the American Psychological Association shows that burnout develops in stages, with each stage having distinct warning signs that we typically brush off or normalize. Your body is desperately waving red flags while you keep pretending everything's fine. By the time most people finally admit they're burning out, they're already in what researchers call stage 3, the point where recovery takes much longer and the damage to your health, relationships, and career is much more severe. The most concerning signal? Emotional detachment. That subtle shift where things you used to care deeply about start feeling meh. The passion project that suddenly feels like a chore. The colleagues whose success you can't quite celebrate anymore. The subtle feeling that you're just going through the motions. According to research from Christina Maslach, one of the world's leading burnout researchers, this emotional distancing is actually a protective mechanism. Your brain is trying to protect you from more pain by disconnecting your feelings. It's saying, if I don't care as much, it won't hurt as much when things go wrong. This disconnection is the first step on the road to full burnout. A study in the Journal of Occupational Health Psychology found that once emotional detachment sets in, people typically have only 6 to 8 weeks before they hit more severe burnout symptoms if nothing changes. It's like a dashboard warning light has turned on, but you can't see the timer. The physical symptoms function as your body's dashboard indicators and usually appear before the mental and emotional ones. Tension headaches that start coming more frequently. Digestive issues that don't have another explanation. Jaw pain from clenching your teeth at night. A study in psychosomatic medicine found that these physical symptoms often appear 2 to 3 weeks before people notice psychological symptoms of burnout. My favorite example is what my doctor called burnout back. This specific type of upper back and shoulder tension that comes from your body being in a constant stress response. I thought I just had bad posture, but it was actually my muscles staying contracted for hours because my nervous system was stuck in fight or flight mode. According to a study published in the Journal of Occupational Health, 76% of professionals couldn't identify these early warning signs in themselves. We're literally trained not to notice when we're heading toward a cliff. Sleep changes are another significant signal, like that weird phenomenon where you're exhausted all day, but suddenly get a second wind right when you should be going to bed, or waking up at 3 a.m. with your mind racing about work. These aren't random sleep issues. They're your body's attempt to alert you. Then there's increased cynicism, that sarcastic voice in your head making comments about projects you used to be excited about. It sounds like, what's the point of even trying? We often mistake this for being realistic, but it's actually one of the first psychological symptoms of burnout. Your decision-making ability suffers too. Research from the University of California found that chronic stress impairs the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for complex decisions. When you start second-guessing simple choices or feeling overwhelmed by decisions you used to make easily, that's a neurological response to sustained stress. About 2 years into my recovery journey, I developed a weekly check-in that saved me from sliding back into burnout at least 3 times. Every Sunday evening, I ask myself 7 specific questions. How did my body feel this week? Did I find myself getting irritated by things that normally wouldn't bother me? Did I feel disconnected from people or activities I usually enjoy? This check-in catches subtle shifts before they become problems, like when I noticed I had stopped laughing at jokes for 2 weeks straight, or when I realized I hadn't called any friends just to chat in over a month. These weren't burnout yet, but they were definitely warning lights on my dashboard. The good news? Early intervention works. Research published in the Journal of Applied Psychology found that addressing burnout in its early stages can prevent a full burnout cycle, potentially saving 3 to 6 months of recovery time. It's like catching a small kitchen fire before it burns down the whole house. My most effective early warning system is a 2-minute body scan I do every morning before getting out of bed. I close my eyes and check in with how each part of my body feels, starting with my toes and moving up to my head, looking for tension, pain, or anything that feels off. This helps me notice patterns, like when my shoulders have been tight for days or when my stomach's been in knots all week. What makes this so effective is that it bypasses rationalization. My mind might say, everything's fine, you're just busy, but my body never lies. The tension in my jaw, the tightness in my chest, these physical signals can't be talked away, and they show up long before I'd consciously admit I'm struggling. With practice, reading these signals becomes as intuitive as interpreting your car's dashboard warning lights. The 30-day burnout recovery plan, that 6-week countdown timer doesn't have to be a death sentence. When emotional detachment starts setting in, you actually don't need to wait for the full crash. I discovered something that shocked me. You can reverse burnout symptoms with just 30 days of targeted interventions, even while continuing your regular work. The secret isn't some magical technique, but rather a specific sequence of small changes that build on each other in a way most recovery plans completely miss. When I hit my own breaking point, I couldn't afford to just quit. I had bills to pay, a team depending on me, and frankly, not enough savings to take 3 months off to find myself in Bali. I needed something that would work in the real world with real pressures. And that's exactly what I developed, a 30-day recovery plan that combines all 5 frameworks into daily actions you can implement starting today. Let's be honest about most burnout advice out there. It usually falls into two unhelpful categories. The first is vague platitudes. Practice self-care or be kind to yourself. Great, but how? The second type is extreme and unrealistic. Quit your job immediately or take a sabbatical. Neither works for most of us. My 30-day plan stands apart because it's both practical and systematic. I've broken it down week by week so you can see exactly how these frameworks build on each other. You're following a proven sequence rather than random wellness practices. Week 1 focuses on energy auditing and boundary setting, the essential foundation. You'll track your energy for 7 days to identify exactly where it's going. Could those 3 p.m. meetings be consistently draining you? Might calls with specific clients leave you exhausted? This tracking reveals patterns you never noticed before. Simultaneously, you'll implement 3 essential boundaries: 1 time boundary, 1 expectation boundary, and 1 accessibility boundary. These act as strategic protections for your newly identified energy patterns. Week 2 introduces cognitive reframing and micro-recovery protocols. With basic energy protection established, you begin rebuilding your reserves. You'll use a thought trigger journal to catch burnout-accelerating thoughts and implement 3 micro-recovery protocols: 90-minute focus blocks with 10-minute recovery breaks, the 3-minute midday reset breathing exercise, and an end-of-day ritual that signals your brain when work truly ends. The results come quickly. Most people report better sleep and less reactivity to stress by week's end, because these interventions literally change cortisol patterns. Weeks 3 and 4 bring deeper transformation through purpose recalibration and sustainable systems. With renewed energy and clarity, you'll complete the purpose alignment exercise to distinguish energizing versus draining activities. You'll restructure your work week based on your energy patterns and boundaries, aiming for the 70% rule. If your new system works 70% of the time, that's success. Perfectionism only leads back to burnout. After 30 days, you won't be completely cured. Recovery isn't linear. But you'll have established foundations for sustainable energy management and broken the psychological patterns that triggered burnout initially. Have you noticed how you've normalized your exhaustion? The surprising first step most people skip is simply acknowledging burnout. High achievers often mistake chronic stress for normal adult life. When was the last time you took a proper lunch break? Do you remember what it feels like to end a workday energized rather than depleted? I worked with a client who hadn't taken a lunch break in 3 years. She laughed when I suggested stepping away from her desk to eat. She genuinely thought successful people just powered through. Her recovery began by recognizing this wasn't normal or necessary. Another critical component is accountability. Your burned-out brain struggles with self-monitoring, requiring external structures. During my recovery, I sent a daily text to my sister with 3 numbers: energy level, hours slept, and boundary maintenance score, 1 to 10. This 20-second habit made an enormous difference by creating external accountability. This plan addresses both symptoms and causes simultaneously, actively rebuilding your relationship with work, energy, and success. The transformation unfolds gradually but noticeably. My own implementation milestones were revealing: sleeping through the night by day 7, genuinely laughing at work by day 14, after months without, sustaining 2 hours of focused work without overwhelm by day 21, and experiencing more end-of-day energy by day 30 than I'd had in years. The beauty of this approach lies in its adaptability. During demanding work periods, you can adjust the intensity while maintaining the framework. Even implementing half the plan shows significant results because each element reinforces the others. What would regaining your energy mean for your work performance? For your relationships outside work? For how you feel about yourself? These questions aren't hypothetical. They're the real possibilities awaiting on the other side of burnout recovery. Antidote. Now, I mentioned this plan is customizable, but here's where things get really interesting. Not all burnout is created equal. You might be surprised to learn that researchers have actually identified 3 distinct types of burnout, each requiring its own recovery approach. It's kind of like how different types of headaches need different medications. What works for a tension headache might do nothing for a migraine. This discovery completely changed how I approached my own recovery. For years, I was applying generic burnout advice that wasn't designed for my specific situation. No wonder nothing seemed to stick. According to research by Dr. Ayala Pines and Dr. Christina Masloch, each burnout type has unique characteristics and triggers. The first type is overload burnout. This is what most people picture when they think of burnout. You're drowning in responsibilities, constantly overwhelmed, and working yourself to exhaustion. The key signs include feeling like you can never catch up, physical exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, and a sense that you're always behind despite working constantly. For overload burnout, the energy as currency and micro-recovery frameworks work best. Your primary issue is energy management. You're spending more than you have with no system for replenishment. One client of mine who experienced severe overload burnout started by tracking her energy for a week. She discovered that morning team meetings were draining her so significantly that she had almost nothing left for her actual priorities. The second type is under-challenge burnout. This happens when your work lacks meaning or fails to engage your abilities. You might not even be working that much, but you still feel completely depleted. Key signs include boredom, feeling that your talents are wasted, and a creeping sense of, why am I even doing this? If that sounds familiar, purpose recalibration should be your first focus. I worked with a software developer who was technically successful, but felt burned out despite reasonable hours. We discovered he was spending 90% of his time debugging other people's code instead of creating new solutions, the part that energized him. By restructuring his role to include more design work, his burnout symptoms diminished within weeks. The third type is neglect burnout, which stems from a lack of recognition, autonomy, or control. You might be pouring your heart into work that no one acknowledges, or feeling helpless to change problematic situations. Signs include increased cynicism, feeling invisible, and a sense of helplessness about your circumstances. For neglect burnout, boundary redesign and cognitive reframing offer immediate relief. These frameworks help you reclaim your sense of agency and challenge thought patterns keeping you stuck. One teacher I worked with was experiencing severe neglect burnout. She started by setting firm boundaries around after-hours parent communication and reframing her thoughts about always being available to being effective when present. So how do you figure out which type of burnout you're experiencing? I've developed a simple assessment based on the research. Ask yourself, do I feel primarily overwhelmed by the amount of work or underwhelmed by its meaning? Do I finish most days physically exhausted or more emotionally drained? Am I frustrated more by lack of time or lack of recognition? Would having more help with tasks solve my problem? Or do I need different tasks altogether? Do I feel like I'm drowning in work or just going through meaningless motions? Your answers will point toward your primary burnout type, though many people experience a mix. About 60% of my audience identifies primarily with overload burnout, 25% with under-challenge burnout, and 15% with neglect burnout. The framework pairing that works for most ambitious professionals combines energy as currency with cognitive reframing. This combination addresses both practical energy management issues and thought patterns driving overwork. Based on feedback from thousands of viewers, this pairing produces noticeable results within 2 weeks for about 80% of people. Your specific situation might require a different approach. In a toxic environment, emphasize boundary redesign first. If questioning your career path, purpose recalibration might need to be your initial focus. Consider Sarah and Michael, 2 clients with identical burnout symptoms but different causes. Sarah, a marketing director, managed too many campaigns with too few resources. Classic overload burnout. We started with energy as currency and micro-recovery, having her track energy patterns and implement recovery breaks. Within 3 weeks, she reported feeling like a different person despite her unchanged workload. Michael, a senior analyst, faced under-challenge burnout. He'd mastered everything years ago and was just going through motions. We focused on purpose recalibration, identifying projects aligned with his desire to mentor others. By restructuring his role to include developing junior team members, his engagement dramatically improved. Same symptoms, different causes, completely different solutions. That's why generic approaches to burnout often fail. you need the right tool for your specific problem. The personalization extends beyond burnout type. Your work environment and personal tendencies influence which frameworks will be most effective. In collaborative environments with reasonable leadership, you might implement all 5 frameworks. In rigid, high-pressure settings, start with smaller, less visible changes. Your personal tendencies matter too. If you overthink things, cognitive reframing might need priority. If you're a people pleaser, struggling with no, boundary redesign could be your key starting point. Most people need at least 3 frameworks to see lasting change, but the order and emphasis vary based on individual circumstances. The good news is these frameworks are complementary. Each reinforces the others, creating a positive cycle rather than competing for your attention. Sustainable success, performance without self-destruction. The frameworks reinforce each other beautifully, but there's still that nagging question that keeps coming up in my DMs. Can you truly achieve at a high level without the burnout? I used to think this was impossible, that success required sacrifice and suffering. But what I've discovered through research completely changed my perspective on performance. Turns out, the world's top performers aren't burning themselves out at all. They're working fewer hours than most of us. Stanford University researchers found that productivity sharply declines after 50 hours of work per week, and after 55 hours, drops so much that extra time becomes pointless. Someone working 70 hours produces virtually nothing more than someone working 55 hours, a revelation that fundamentally shifted how I approach my own work schedule. When I studied Olympic athletes' training methods, I noticed something remarkable. These individuals alternate between periods of intense focus and deliberate recovery. One coach told me, the magic doesn't happen during the training, it happens during the recovery. This principle extends far beyond sports. Consider the CEO I recently interviewed who runs a billion-dollar company while working just 6 hours a day. She structures her day around 3 90-minute deep work sessions with recovery breaks between. Every decision passes through a filter. Will this move the needle on our most important goal? Everything else gets delegated or eliminated. High performers have created their own versions of the frameworks we've discussed. They treat energy as their most precious resource, set firm boundaries around time and attention, question unhelpful productivity narratives, prioritize recovery, and align work with deeper purpose. Alex Honnold, the free solo climber from the Oscar-winning documentary, exemplifies this approach. Before climbing 3,000-foot rock faces without ropes, he maintains strict sleep protocols, plans nutrition carefully, practices visualization techniques, and declines opportunities misaligned with his core mission. His methodical approach taught me that even when stakes are literally life and death, recovery matters more than constant pushing. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's research on flow states provides critical context. This optimal state of consciousness where we feel and perform our best operates in cycles. Attempting to maintain high performance all day isn't sustainable. Your brain cannot maintain it. I've experienced this firsthand, trying to maintain peak focus for 12-hour stretches, only to find my productivity plummeting. Many ambitious people make this mistake, trying to perform at maximum from morning until night. But elite performers cycle between engagement and recovery, focus and diffusion throughout their day. This biological reality shaped how I restructured my own workday. The distinction between productive intensity and burnout-inducing hustle is crucial. Productive intensity means working with complete focus for defined periods on important tasks. Burnout-inducing hustle means working reactively on whatever appears for extended periods while ignoring bodily signals. One creates sustainable results. The other causes harm. Warning signs you're crossing into burnout territory include finishing work completely depleted rather than satisfied, small obstacles causing disproportionate frustration, forgetting why you cared about your work, working longer but accomplishing less, and never mentally disconnecting from work. A 7-year study at a consulting firm yielded surprising results. Consistent overworkers get passed over for promotions more often. Managers couldn't differentiate quality between those working 80 hours versus those simply appearing to work 80 hours. However, they identified burnout signs, making them hesitant to promote overworkers to leadership. Across interviews with top performers, surgeons, software engineers, executives, entrepreneurs, I noticed 5 habits preventing burnout. They're selective about attention allocation, build recovery into daily schedules, regularly evaluate activity alignment with personal success definitions, proactively manage energy drains, and prioritize sleep quality. Sleep emerged as a universal secret weapon. A tech founder shared, "I protect my sleep schedule more fiercely than business strategy meetings. If choosing between extra sleep or work, sleep wins because with proper rest, I accomplish in 4 hours what takes 8 when tired." When I adopted this approach, my creative output improved dramatically while working fewer hours. Dr. Matthew Walker's sleep research at UC Berkeley reinforces this. The shorter your sleep, the shorter your life. Inadequate sleep reduces cognitive performance, creativity, and emotional regulation, all critical success components. Another common thread: high performers regularly reassess what success means personally. One executive leading 500-plus people dedicates Friday afternoons to asking, "Am I succeeding at what matters most?" This prevents pursuing achievements that appear impressive but lack fulfillment, a practice I've adopted quarterly with transformative results. Performance research increasingly shows sustainable success isn't about pushing harder, it's working smarter with your body's natural rhythms. True productivity isn't about hours worked, but quality produced in chosen work hours. Quality stems from a properly rested, nourished brain aligned with meaningful objectives. Can you transform burnout into productivity without sacrificing success? Absolutely. It requires working with your biology instead of against it, and including well-being in your definition of success. Sustainable high performance comes from strategic work periods, intentional recovery, and purpose alignment, a formula that has completely transformed my approach to achievement. We've covered a lot of ground, but if there's one thing I want you to take away, it's this. Burnout isn't inevitable. It's a series of small choices that add up over time, which means you have the power to make different choices. Start with just one framework. Maybe energy as currency speaks to you, or perhaps you need to work on your cognitive reframing. Creating small changes today builds momentum for tomorrow. Protecting your energy is essential for creating your best work and making your intended impact. The frameworks we've discussed provide a pathway to sustainable success. What's the first small change you'll make today? Let me know in the comments.